Hello and welcome back to the Sam Beast YouTube channel. My name is David.foxen and today we're going to be talking about all of the key data sets you need within your Amdb for your desktops and laptops. Hope you enjoy it, hope you find it useful. Let's dig into the video. If you missed my previous quickfire video on what an Amdb is, I'll put a link to it in the description just so you know you can quickly get up to speed as to what on earth we're talking about when we're discussing an Amdb and how important it is to ITAM. So in that video we discussed how the asset management database is the central source of truth for your hardware asset management data. From an ITAM perspective, we're not talking about the CMDB here, we're talking about our Amdb. And so now we're going to go through some of the key data sets that you require for your laptops and desktops. So some of these are going to be really obvious to you. However, please bear with me. And a lot of these we'll discuss about how you can use inventory sources and automated tooling to actually gather this information and automatically populate it into your Amdb. Some of these will require some manual work and some manual efforts, but we'll flag those ones as we go along. So let's dive straight in then. The first ones that you're going to need for your desktops and laptops in particular are your manufacturers. What's the make of the laptop or desktop that you've got? The model. It's really important that you know the model number or the model name. This may also include like a generation or a processor chip like an i5 or an i7. Really useful bits of information for your Amdb. You're going to need some dedicated data relating to that asset in itself. So the serial number that's unique to that asset. The asset tag reference as well. Whether that's something that you're implementing within your organization, which you've already got. You need to make sure that you have the asset tag information on the device and also then in the asset management database. Some organizations actually incorporate the asset tag reference into the name or the build of the device. So it may automatically populate as you do the scanning and use the inventory tools, or it's something you may have to manually add in yourself. Next up, we've got your dedicated machine name. Again, this could be the asset tag information. It could be a completely different reference whatsoever, but it's important that you've got both of those because ultimately, when a user rings up to say, hey, look, my laptop's running really slowly, 9 times out of 10, you're either going to ask them for their asset tag or the machine name, right? I'm sure you've done it yourselves when you've rung up the service desk looking for that brand new MacBook Pro. Huh? Am I right? Next up, we've got the reference to the configuration item. So hopefully your asset management database and your configuration management database are running in parallel. They're working together. So whenever you create a laptop or a desktop, there will also be a subsequent configuration item. That's also then really useful to have the configuration item reference on the asset table within your Amdb. Next up, we want to know the assigned user, so who you actually gave that asset out to at the beginning of its life cycle or the beginning of its journey in that particular part of the life cycle, and then who the most recent user is for that asset. The assigned user is typically a manual field that you're updating yourselves as you go through your hardware provisioning process. The most recent user is what your technology is saying it is the last person to have logged into this device. Really useful bits of information when you're doing some like ownership verification or internal reviews to make sure that who you're giving the assets out to are still actually with that person. And if they've been passed along, why have they been passed along and why were you not informed of it to be able to update your ownership records in your asset management database? Two really useful and underrated fields. Also really handy if you ever lose an asset, to go and contact and ask about, where the last place they had it was, has it been pinged so that you can then speak to information security and get that device locked down. Next up, you've got the location. This is typically the user's office and the floor that they work on. Sometimes for desktops, you can even go even further into the detail and give like a desk number if you're operating on a desk number schema. Locations become a tricky one with the split working or the hybrid working or fully remote working. But again, I would just put their home office not their home address, but their local company office that they are going to go into whenever they need to go into the office for meetings. So put that one as the location. Department, pretty self-explanatory. Where does that person work, or what department has that asset been assigned to if it's a communal asset? Cost center and purchase date, who bought it, when did they buy it, how much did it cost in purchase cost, the invoice reference to prove that you've purchased it legally and through the right channels. So you've got the invoice reference again to prove that you've paid for it as well. So the state is your primary high level state. So this is typically like in use, in stock, in transit if you just ordered stuff, under investigation, and then the sub-state just gives you a bit more information into that. So if it's in stock, is it available? Is it good to go out? Is it actually pending disposal or pending IT asset disposition, pending repairs? Is it, if it's in transit, is it on order? Is it on its way to you? A bit more information really on supporting the overall state of the asset is the sub-state to give you that better data. More information for your service desk guys as well as they're going through looking at stock is really handy for the stock management process. Speaking of stock, next up, I really love adding in custom fields, and typically the stockroom is potentially a custom field within your Amdb. It may not be out of the box with your ITSM solution. Stockroom's a big one for me. You can even add another custom field in there to say where in the stockroom it is, whether it's on shelf 4, row 7, next to the fire extinguisher. If you want to be that granular, go for it. But typically you just see stockroom and then maybe a shelf location in there, which is, again, really useful information. Next up, we got last scanned date. When was this asset last seen online? Really important when you're doing your under investigation processes so that you can look for assets that have been inactive for 30 days. So you can kick off your process, contact the users, try and ping the device, understand why it's not been online. Do they really need this device? Or alert information security if the device has gone missing and they need to, perform their overall tasks to lock down the device again. We've also got an updated by field within the Amdb. Now, if you've got multiple inventory sources going into your central asset management database, it's really useful to understand what source has updated that asset. Again, another really good auditable field that you can look at to say, great, SCCM's working fine, it's updated every day, or this other discovery inventory source is working fine, it's updated today, or, oh, hold on, that asset's meant to be updated by SCCM, but it hasn't been updated for 5 days, yet Active Directory has got a last use date. Might be an issue with SCCM there, or there's something wrong with the client on the device, whatever it may be. Another really good bit of information that ITAM can have within the asset management database. Next up, we're looking at the end of life of the asset. So we're looking at the scheduled retirement dates. When your organization plans on getting rid of the device, you may have like a 3-year life cycle for laptops, 5 years for desktops, 3 years for phones, whatever it may be. When you're planning on doing that hardware refresh for it, put that date in there. A lot of these tools that will automatically pop off from the purchase date. So you can do, purchase date plus 3 years, plus 5 years, whatever it may be. Really useful bit of information when you're planning your hardware refresh cycles. Also looking at the warranty expiry dates from the vendor itself. Again, if you're going off standard warranty, really easy to map this. Purchase date plus 1 year, plus 3 years, or plus 5 years, depending on what the vendor's offering you. We're also then looking at the vendor end of life date, so when it is no longer supported by the hardware vendor themselves. This information can actually be quite hard to come by. If it's a brand new model, the hardware vendor may not have an end of life date yet. However, if it's something that's a bit older, you can put that information in there, again, to support your hardware refresh process. And, if the refresh process isn't working properly or people aren't approving the spend, you can point to it and say, well, the vendor no longer supports it. Their vendor end of life was on this date. That was 6 months ago, a year ago. This is a security risk. We need to replace it. Next up, you've got the actual retire date when you said, thank you very much, asset, but you've reached the end of your life with us. We are officially decommissioning and retiring you. And then ultimately that disposal date on when you sent it off to your third-party disposal company or IT asset disposition company. What date did you send it off to? We're then also looking for your disposal references. This is typically like your WE certificate if you're in the UK. A unique reference to show that you have followed the correct processes, the local laws and regulations, the electronic waste, the environmental, the security, all of the different components that now make up IT asset disposition and the disposal of electronic equipment. Alongside that as well, you need your data destruction reference. You may be doing this in-house with a tool like Blanco. If you are, awesome. Get your InfoSec teams to send you that list whenever you're, disposing of an asset and ultimately, clearing out that hard drive using a tool like Blanco. If you have outsourced that, get your third party to provide that on a monthly basis like you would with your WE certificates, your disposal references, and everything else that comes with the end of life. These are really important bits of information from an external auditor and also internal audit to prove that you are following the correct controls and regulations at the end of life for your organisation's IT assets. Last thing you want is some reputational damage, your asset being thrown in a skip without all the data being wiped properly, or your asset being thrown in a field with your company image and asset tags all over it for some poor farmer to go along and find it and think, God, this company's rubbish. They're fly tipping, which also is illegal. So not great for your reputation if that happens. I think it's also worthwhile mentioning as well that if you are doing the blancoing or any technologies to wipe that hard drive, if for whatever reason that fails or isn't successful, I really do recommend then that you physically destroy the hard drive just to be better safe than sorry. A lot of IT asset disposal and ITAD companies do this anyway. If the Blanco is not successful or similar technologies, they will just say, look guys, it wasn't working for whatever reason. We've actually physically destroyed the hard drive, we've crushed it, we've cut it. Your data's 100% safe. There's no way that people are going to be able to access it. Worth mentioning, but make sure you get all of this end-of-life information. Your ITAD provider, disposal provider, should be providing this to you anyway on like a monthly basis or every 6 months, depending on how often you are disposing or doing the IT asset disposition process of your unwanted old end-of-life assets. Now, we have a few data fields that I've marked in blue here that are optional, if you like, depending on the maturity of your IT asset management function. Really cool ones though. If you are going down this route, it's really useful. The first one is a donation reference. Sorry, I should have mentioned these are all custom fields, by the way. They are not typically out of the box. Get your ITSM tool developers just to create you a free text field, and you're handy. No, you're not. You're dandy. The first of all is the donation reference. So if you are doing donating to local schools or charities, having a reference to say, look, you no longer are responsible for this asset, having some sort of acceptance from the charity as well or the school is really useful from, again, an audit perspective, and also to cover you to say that you're not responsible for it anymore if anything goes wrong. A rebate for any ITADs. So if you're sending your assets off, they're being refurbished and resold, how much money are you getting back for them? It's really useful to put this in there, again, in your asset management database. Really useful monthly KPI for your ITAM function to show how much money you're getting back each month for your old assets. We have two green IT ones as well that are useful. Kilowatts per hour. What's the energy consumption like on your assets? And also the energy efficiency rating as well. Another really interesting one. This is probably more aimed at desktops rather than laptops. But how much energy are they actually consuming and how are they on the scale of energy efficiency ratings? So they're your kind of core Amdb data sets for your desktops and laptops.